The Arizona desert shimmered under the scorching afternoon sun, the heat rising from the sand in wavering waves. At the edge of a bustling auction yard, Luke Carson stood apart, shadowed beneath the brim of his worn hat. Around him, men shouted and waved, bidding fiercely on horses, wagons, and rifles. Dust swirled with every movement, catching in the golden light. Then a new figure appeared, a woman with her head shrouded in a rough, patched sack. The commotion softened into a curious stillness. She was slight, her posture rigid, yet there was a quiet authority about her, as if she belonged to the desert itself. Some men muttered insults, dismissing her like a worthless curiosity, but Luke felt a strange pull, a recognition he didn't try to understand. The auctioneer's voice rasped, demanding bids. Laughter and jeers bounced off the wooden stands. Most men avoided looking at her directly, as if their glances alone could make her vanish. Luke raised his hand calmly, voice steady, cutting through the clamor. $3. Murmurs swept through the crowd, disbelief coloring their faces. Why would the reclusive rancher spend even a coin on her? The hammer fell, and with no further words, Luke lifted the woman onto his horse and guided her away. The journey back was hushed, filled only with the rhythmic thump of hooves and the whisper of wind across the scrub. Luke kept his gaze forward, yet occasionally he stole a careful glance behind him. Her hands rested quietly in her lap, trembling faintly, but she made no move to flee. Dust clung to her clothes, her scent a mix of arid earth and a faint, lingering sweetness, like desert sage after rainfall. He didn't ask her story, he didn't need to. For reasons he could not explain, he felt an instinct to protect her, to shelter her from whatever ghosts trailed behind. When they arrived at his modest ranch, Luke dismounted first and offered her his hand. She paused before accepting it, her touch cool and deliberate. He led her inside. The house was simple, almost barren, save for a cracked mirror and a rifle mounted on the wall, yet it carried a warmth absent from the world outside. Luke guided her to a chair and unfastened the coarse twine binding the sack over her head. The fabric fell away, revealing hair dark and tangled, high cheekbones, and eyes deep and shadowed, like the night sky. She blinked against the dim light, hesitant and raw. Luke stayed back, respecting the space she seemed to need. "What's your name?" he asked gently, his voice low, almost a whisper. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then her words came, soft and trembling, "Nia." The name hung in the room, weighty and fragile, and Luke let it rest there, unspoken understanding bridging the gap between them. Something shifted in that quiet space, two solitary beings acknowledging each other without explanation. Days blended into one another with the routine of ranch life. Luke worked the cattle under the relentless sun, while Nia, quiet but attentive, learned the rhythm of the chores. She cooked simple meals, swept the floor, and tended the horses, each movement careful yet fluid, her body holding an unspoken tension. One evening, Luke noticed the faint, pale scars on her wrists as she hung laundry. He said nothing, tipping his hat in acknowledgement, though the image settled heavily in his mind, an unvoiced question lingering between them. Their silence became companionable over the weeks. At first, Nia spoke little, her answers brief, her nods precise. Luke didn't push. He taught her the ways of the ranch, repairing fences, saddling horses, calling the cattle dogs when storms brewed. She absorbed everything with an unwavering focus, earning his respect without uttering a word. In quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch together, watching the horizon glow with molten reds and golds, neither needing conversation to fill the space. One night, a storm tore across the desert, lightning slicing through the sky and rain hammering the roof. Luke found Nia seated by the fire, knees drawn close, her hands wrapped around them. The firelight flickered across her features, revealing lines of tension softened by the warmth. She lifted her gaze to him briefly, then returned it to the flames, silent but unafraid. Luke, standing in the doorway, felt the weight of the moment, the quiet understanding that had grown between them. It was a fragile bond, delicate yet undeniable, forged in the endless desert heat and shadowed by secrets they had yet to share. He felt her weight against him, a fragile presence seeking comfort, and without hesitation, he lowered himself onto the ground opposite her. The firelight danced across her features, casting gentle shadows that softened the sharp edges of her worry. She studied him cautiously, as though measuring whether she could trust this stranger who had inexplicably entered her world. That night, words finally spilled from her lips, trembling and tentative at first. She spoke of being torn away from her home, of the terror that had stolen her voice, leaving her mute in the face of the world's cruelty. Luke didn't interrupt or offer platitudes. He merely remained there, steady and unjudging, hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on hers. When the recollections overwhelmed her and her voice cracked under the weight of memory, he simply whispered, "You're safe here." Those words, simple and unadorned, carried a gravity that felt like a vow etched deeper than any oath could be. A subtle shift crossed her expression, a fleeting glimmer of hope breaking through the darkness she had carried for so long. As time unfurled, months passing in the quiet rhythm of the desert, a bond grew between them, unexpected and tender. Luke began to anticipate her laughter, rare and genuine, a moment of sunlight in the dusty expanse. He guided her hands as she learned to shoot, praising her steady aim with quiet approval, while she shared her language with him, her lilting tones correcting his rough pronunciation with patience and warmth. Under the endless canopy of stars, they would sit together in companionable silence, the world around them hushed as if granting them a private sanctuary. One morning, after a long ride rounding up the cattle, Luke returned to find Nia waiting on the porch, the sun highlighting the cascade of her loose hair and the newfound strength in her gaze. She seemed transformed, as if the burden of fear that had once weighed so heavily on her shoulders was gradually lifting. Luke paused at the gate, unsure of what to say, but she moved closer, meeting his eyes with unwavering certainty. "You don't have to stay," he murmured, voice low and laden with emotion. "You're free now. You can leave whenever you wish." For a heartbeat, she simply regarded him, silence stretching between them like a fragile bridge. Then, with quiet resolve, she pressed her hand to his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat. "I don't want to go," she whispered, "because I love you, Luke Carson." Her confession settled between them like rain soaking into parched soil, filling cracks they hadn't realized existed. By sunrise, the story had woven itself into the fabric of the small town. Whispers circulated of the reserved cowboy who had taken in the mysterious woman once paraded before strangers, now his wife. Some spoke with derision, others with envy, but Luke and Nia paid little attention. Their world had contracted to the sweeping plains, the quiet cadence of ranch life, and the unspoken understanding that love often doesn't require spectacle, only steadfast hearts and the courage to finally voice the truth. Days melded seamlessly, measured by the sun climbing and dipping across the horizon, the lowing of cattle, and the steady rhythm of work. Nia adapted quickly, her hands toughening from daily labor, her skin bronzed by the relentless Arizona sun. Luke observed her with quiet fascination, always respectful, though his gaze lingered in ways he could scarcely explain. She moved with a grace that mirrored the land itself, strong, silent, unyielding, yet serene. Each day brought new lessons. Luke taught her to repair fences, to whistle for the horses, and to aim a rifle with precision. She absorbed each instruction with quiet determination, her progress swift and remarkable, until she could ride across the fields with the effortless ease of someone born to the saddle. Luke never voiced it, but pride settled in his chest, watching her hair stream behind her in the wind like a banner of newfound freedom. At night, beneath a sky strewn with stars, they would gather by the campfire. The flames flickered against their faces, coloring them in warm amber light. Initially, their conversations were brief, exchanging polite remarks about the day, the weather, the chores. Gradually, the pauses between words became a shared comfort, a silence that needed no filling. Sometimes, Nia would hum a tune in her native language, her voice soft, melodic, and haunting, and Luke would listen, committing each note to memory, as if fearing its disappearance. Their lives intertwined in quiet harmony, a story built not on grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but on steady presence, patient teaching, and the courage to open their hearts when the world had once seemed cruel and unyielding. Together, They transformed the harsh desert into a sanctuary, their love quietly thriving amidst the rhythm of the land and the gentle pulse of newfound trust. The marks on her wrists were impossible to ignore, yet Luke never mentioned them. He noticed them every time she reached for a pail of water or tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Each sight tightened his chest, not with anger at her, but with a silent fury at the suffering she had endured. He longed to hear her story, but he refused to pry, choosing instead to wait for the moment she might open up of her own volition. Until that day came, he let his care be shown in his deeds, leaving cool water by her doorway during the blazing heat or mending her worn boots without so much as a word. One night, after a long day of herding cattle under the scorching sun, Luke returned to the ranch. The full moon hung low on the horizon, casting silver light across the desert. Nia waited on the porch, her dark hair cascading loosely around her shoulders, glimmering in the moonlight. Luke halted mid-step, his heart catching in his throat. She looked almost unreal, a softness amidst the ruggedness of the land, a presence he had not dared hope for. "You don't have to stay," Luke said quietly, his voice rough with restrained emotion. He leaned his hat against his thigh, his gaze dropping to the ground. "You're free. You can walk away anytime. No one here would stop you." He spoke these words to offer her freedom, to remind her that her life was hers once more. Yet beneath his calm tone, a part of him quivered, afraid of her answer. The silence stretched, broken only by the chirp of crickets and the faint whisper of wind through the dry grass. Slowly she stepped closer, until only a breath separated them. Her hand rested against his chest, firm yet gentle, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his shirt. "I don't want to leave," she murmured, her voice soft yet unwavering. "Because I love you, Luke Carson." The simplicity of her words carried a weight far greater than their sound, settling between them like a sacred promise. Luke's chest tightened, his eyes searching hers for hesitation. But all he saw was honesty, unshielded and raw, as clear and open as the desert sky above. Without thinking, his hand rose to cradle her face, his rough fingers grazing the softness of her skin. She leaned into the touch, closing her eyes for a fleeting second, savoring the sense of safety he offered. By dawn, whispers had already spread across town. The solitary cowboy with haunted eyes had married the enigmatic woman who had been auctioned months earlier. Some voices murmured with judgment or suspicion, while others greeted them with respectful nods or gentle smiles as Luke rode through town with Nia by his side. Yet neither paid these whispers any heed. They had discovered that their world was not shaped by outsiders' opinions but by the quiet strength they had forged together. Life on the ranch retained its rhythm. Fences needed mending, cattle demanded attention, and trips to town remained necessary. Yet an unspoken warmth now lingered, weaving through the corners of the land and hearts alike. In the mornings, Luke would find Nia in the kitchen, her soft hum filling the air as coffee brewed, her hair tumbling freely across her shoulders. In the evenings, she rode alongside him, laughter carried by the wind across the vast plains, their world stretching endlessly around them. On nights when shadows felt too long and restless memories threatened to rise, Nia would awaken from dreams she could never fully escape. Luke would sit beside her then, his arm a grounding weight, offering silence instead of questions, holding her until her breathing steadied and her trembling ceased. She never spoke of those nights afterward, and he never pressed. They understood, without words, that love did not always require language. Sometimes it simply existed in presence and touch. Seasons changed and the ranch became a home. Not just for Luke but for Nia as well. She planted wildflowers along the porch, their colors vivid against the dusty backdrop, and painted the old rocking chair a crisp white, laughing at Luke's playful teasing. Slowly, the house shed its emptiness, filling with warmth and life. Boots left neatly by the door, blankets draped casually over chairs, the faint scent of sage lingering in the rooms. Though the days remained long and laborious, together they built a life marked by quiet happiness. On evenings when the sky burned in shades of pink and gold, Luke would watch Nia standing by the fence, her hair catching the dying light, and think how something bought for a mere $3 had become more precious than anything he could have imagined. The ranch, once just a stretch of rough land, had transformed into a sanctuary, a testament to love's patient, enduring power. And in that rugged Arizona landscape, they had found a life far richer than either had dared dream, stitched together not by wealth or chance, but by trust, care, and unwavering devotion.